Ride with me into Dust Valley, where dust storms choke the sky and men wager lives for cattle and land. The Shaw family thought they were clever, sending their fat daughter west as a cruel joke. But at the edge of Dusty Ridge stood a giant cowboy, 3 heads taller than any man, chest broad as the barn he built with his bare hands. He wasn't looking for beauty in ribbons. He was looking for truth. And when their eyes met, the world shifted. Stay with me, because what they called shame became the strongest bond on the frontier. The letter came at sunrise, carried by a rider who looked like he had slept in dust and whiskey. Hank Boone paid him a nickel. The man wanted a dime but backed off when Hank's shadow covered him like a barn wall. Boone's shoulders stretched the seams of his shirt, his frame filling the doorway of Dusty Ridge ranch house. He broke the wax with his thumb. The Shaw crest gleamed blood red. He read slow, practical, mild of temper, suitable for household life. He read again and again. Not a word about beauty, no line about golden hair, blue eyes, or charm. Boone frowned. This was not how families described a daughter they prized. Words chosen like a bill of sale, meant to cover, not reveal. His pulse tightened. He folded the paper, slid it into his vest. Outside, wind raked the corral fence, making it groan. Dust blew in sheets. Horses stamped iron troughs. Boone moved through chores, but the letter worked under his ribs like a burr. He pumped water. The handle screamed. He slopped hogs. They squealed. Chickens scattered, wings slapping his boots. None of it eased the question clawing him. Why send her with words that hid more than they showed? By noon, he saddled Flint, his bay gelding, and headed for town. Sagebrush shook in the wind. The trail wound past creek beds baked dry, wagon wrecks left to bleach like bones. Sun burned hot enough to split lips. Boone rode with 2 Colts on his belt. Not because he hunted trouble, but because the prairie was a place where law rode late. Dry Creek town wavered in heat. Clapboard fronts leaned into the road. The Silver Spur Saloon spilled piano notes ragged, drunk, missing half the tune. Outside the general store, flour was $2 a sack, coffee $1.50, beans 5 cents a pound. Boone dismounted, tied Flint. He ducked under the awning. Inside, flies buzzed over barrels. Men argued cattle prices. A spittoon rang when someone spat. Boone bought kerosene, coffee, a box of shells. The clerk eyed him. "Boone, you expectin' company?" "Word is you sent for a wife." Boone's jaw tightened. Gossip always rode faster than rail. He laid down silver, said nothing. Silence fed the suspicion curling in his gut. If town already knew, then the Shaws had spread the word, quick, too quick. Almost laughing while they did it. Outside, heat pressed down. He passed the saloon porch. Men leaned, whiskey glasses sweating. One called, "Careful, Boone. Mail-order wives come with more dust than dowry." Laughter cracked. Short, sharp. Another added, "Maybe they're sending you what's left after the pretty ones marry off." Spit hit the boards. Boone kept walking. Steps heavy, jaw stone. But inside, the words burned hotter than noon sun. Why was everyone laughing before she even arrived? He swung up on Flint, rode hard out of town. Clouds black as coal stacked on the horizon. Air smelled of iron and rain. He pressed the gelding faster. Prairie grass lashed in the wind. By the time he reached Dusty Ridge, the storm had caught him. Rain slammed down. Hooves pounded mud. Thunder split the sky. He stabled Flint, carried supplies inside. The cabin waited silent. Log walls blackened by smoke. Stone hearth cold. Shelves lined with jars. Boone spread the letter on the oak table his father had carved. Practical, mild, suitable. Each word gnawed like a rat. He'd seen the Shaw daughters at church socials. Ribbons, curls, voices like bells. Yet this daughter Cora was described like plain stock. Not a bride, a problem disguised. He boiled coffee, poured it black into a tin mug. Bitter clawed his throat. He paced the room, adjusted chairs, polished the table until the lamp reflected back. From a trunk, he pulled his mother's knitted scarf, hung it on a nail above the hearth. Motif of care, small warmth against storm. Still, the letter whispered. Practical, mild, Suitable. Lightning flashed white. For an instant, the ranch flared stark. Corrals, water tower, grassland endless. His shadow leapt giant across the wall. He clenched fists. Outlaws, wolves, drought, he could fight those. But a joke hidden in human skin? A family laughing as they rid themselves of their own blood? That pressed heavier than iron shackles. Thunder cracked. Horses screamed in stalls. Rain hissed off shingles. Boone sat at the table, placed his Colt on top of the letter. Steel over words, as if weight of gun could cage suspicion. His breath came short. Fast. The room felt too small. The scarf above the hearth swayed in draft. Soft reminder that things break quiet before they split wide open. He poured another coffee, drank scalding hot. Eyes fixed on the door, expecting it to open without knock. Expecting the storm to shove fate inside before its hour. 2 days, the letter had said. Thursday at sunset. Dusty Ridge would receive a wife, or the husk of one. But Hank Boone did not yet know, could not know, that the cruel jest would not humiliate him. It would break the silence of Dusty Ridge and change his life forever. But Hank hadn't yet learned that the ruthless joke would alter his life entirely. Ash Hollow lay sunk in twilight. The Shaw house crouched on its ridge like an animal too tired to fight. Shingles rattled in the wind. Shutters beat against gray siding. Inside, lamplight flickered over the kitchen table, its surface scarred by years of knives and spilled whiskey. Margaret Shaw sat rigid, eyes as sharp as needles. Charles held Boone's letter again, the paper limp from rereading. Victoria, eldest, smoothed her golden hair, lips curved in practiced sweetness. Isabel leaned against the hearth, skirts spread wide, a cat with claws hidden. They smelled faintly of rosewater, bought in town for dimes earned off others' losses. The youngest daughter, Cora, was missing. She tended her grandmother's breath in the back room. Charles's voice rumbled. Hank Boone owns near half Dusty Ridge. He's asked for a wife. Margaret's tone cut like a blade. Then he shall have one, and it won't be Victoria. It won't be Isabel. He will take Cora. The sisters exchanged quick glances, relief blooming cruel. A giggle slipped from Isabel's throat, bright and merciless. Victoria's laugh followed, sharp as a breaking glass. Poor Cora, Isabel whispered. She'll think it fortune. Margaret's hand struck the table, flat and hard. It is justice. She has shamed us 3 years running, asking questions that weren't hers to ask. Prying into matters that ruined more than one good bargain, they remembered. The banker's contract, spoiled by her insistence. The preacher's wife caught stealing from church funds because Cora refused to look away. Judge Morrison's nephew, his drunken visits revealed. Bruises on his wife no longer hidden. Each truth small alone, together enough to sour neighbors' trust. Charles rubbed his brow. She listens too close, always watching. It's unnatural for a girl. Unnatural? Margaret snapped. It's poison. Best she carry it west to Boone's ranch. Let him suffer her questions. The sisters laughed again, brittle as frost. Isabel leaned close to Victoria. Imagine Boone's face when he sees her. Both collapsed into cruel giggles. They did not know Cora stood beyond the door, pressed against the wall, apron twisted in her fists. The boards were thin, every word pierced clean through. Burden, shame, problem. Stones dropped into a deep well, each echo heavier than the last. Her breath quickened, shallow, sharp. For a moment she wanted to storm in, fling truth back into their smug faces. But silence had kept her alive this long. She pressed harder to the wall, swallowing the sting in her throat. Not yet. She slipped down the hall into her grandmother's room. Curtains drawn, air heavy, the old woman's breath rasped like torn cloth. Cora knelt, clasped the frail hand. I heard them, Grandmama, she whispered. They're sending me away. Not for love, for silence. For shame, the old hand trembled once, no words left. Still, that faint twitch steadied her. Not every bond in this house was poison. Cora stood and looked from the window. Laundry tugged on the line, her sister's dresses bright. her own patched brown sagging in the wind. Beyond the fence, coyotes sang in the ravine. The world lay vast and uncaring, but for one memory. A man at Peterson's post, 3 years back, watching her tend a wounded dog while her family mocked. His eyes had not been scornful. They had been something else, recognition, maybe. Evening settled. The family prayed, words flat, voices false. Margaret's tone was iron. Charles muttered assent, fingers brushing the folded letter in his vest. Victoria and Isabel stitched lace, heads bent together. Cora ladled stew thin as ditch water, bread hard enough to crack teeth. She kept her eyes low. Inside, a slow heat rose. At last Charles cleared his throat. Tomorrow morning we tell her. Thursday the wagon leaves. Boone will have his wife, and this house will breathe again. Margaret nodded. The daughters smirked. Cora set her spoon down. Careful, quiet. They thought her blind, thought her meek. They were wrong. In her attic room she packed her trunk, a shawl with frayed edges, a psalm book, pages worn. At the bottom, wrapped in cloth, the silver pin with her mother's initials, the only kindness left. She tucked it deep. If they found it, they would strip it too. Rain tapped roof shingles all night. Cora lay awake, replaying their laughter until it cut like wire. Yet woven into the pain was that other image, Boone's steady gaze. She did not call it hope. She called it weapon. If they believed her weak, let them. She would step into exile unbroken. Morning came crisp. Chickens clattered, hogs grunted, the sky hard blue. The family sat stiff at the table. Charles cleared his throat again. Margaret's smile was brittle. Cora, she said, you are to be wed. Rancher Boone has asked. You leave tomorrow. Cora's face remained still. She nodded, asked the questions expected. Agreed with calm they mistook for obedience. Inside, her pulse hammered steady. Margaret's voice sweetened falsely. It's time you married. 22 is too old for a daughter under this roof. Victoria and Isabel looked away, feigning innocence. Cora folded her hands. As you wish. Her knuckles trembled under the cloth, but her voice was calm. The family relaxed, satisfied. Only Cora knew. By afternoon, her trunk sat latched. Charles tested the lock, grunted. Margaret shut the lid like a coffin. That night, laughter floated again from the kitchen. Cruel, certain. She listened from the stairwell, shadow among shadows. Let it score deep, let it burn. She would carry each word west, proof of what she survived. When silence fell, she returned to her room, sat on the narrow bed, touched the silver pin. Her lips barely moved. Not broken. Not yet, stars pricked above Ash Hollow. Coyotes cried across the ridges. Cora sat straight, shoulders set, feeling the weight of tomorrow pressing near the wagon, the long road, the unknown. And somewhere beyond, a man named Hank Boone, who once looked at her without scorn. She did not know whether to fear or to hope, but she knew this: she would meet exile with eyes open. Cora gripped the pin tighter, whispering to herself that tomorrow's road would not break her. It would reveal her. At Dusty Ridge, the storm had passed, leaving the ground slick and the air sharp with sage. Dawn bled red across the horizon. Hank Boone stood in the yard, shovel in hand, boots sunk ankle-deep in mud. He moved with the patience of a man who knew storms came often and left ruins behind. Branches littered the ground. Shingles lay cracked. The fence leaned where lightning had struck. Boone bent his giant frame to the work of setting things right. The ranch smelled of wet earth and horses. Chickens scratched nervously in puddles. The cattle lowed from the pasture, unsettled after a night of thunder. Boone heaved a fallen log aside, shoulders bulging, breath misting in the cold air. His shirt clung damp against muscle like carved stone. He worked steady, alone as he had for years. Dusty Ridge was vast. A barn with a sagging roof, corrals stretching wide, a water tower silhouetted against pale sky. Boone had built most with his own hands. Timber dragged down from Red Mesa, nails bought dear in Dry Creek. Each plank held sweat. Each fence post hammered into place reminded him of what was missing. He could mend wood, feed stock, shoe horses, but he could not fill silence. After hours, he straightened, leaning on the shovel. His gaze swept across the yard. He saw not just mud and ruin, but emptiness. A hearth without laughter, a table set for one, a ranch too large for a single man's shadow. He spat into the dirt, wiped rain from his beard. Then he reached for a broom propped against the wall. Even giants swept when the yard demanded it. He dragged the broom in long arcs, clearing leaves from the porch, sweeping puddled dust away from the door. Each stroke echoed in the hollow quiet. He paused, looking at the scarf his mother had left, still hanging above the hearth inside. It fluttered faintly in draught, a whisper of care long gone. Boone's jaw set hard. He told himself he needed a wife to soften the silence, to share the weight of land. Yet the words of the letter gnawed still. Practical, mild, suitable. It felt less like promise and more like warning. By midday, he saddled Flint and rode the perimeter. Fence posts leaned but held. The stream that fed his stock ran brown, swollen with rain. He marked where he would dig new ditches, muttering under breath. His voice startled the birds. Flint's ears flicked, glad for sound. When Boone returned, the yard was quiet again. He boiled coffee into blackened pot, ate beans cold from a tin. At the table, the letter lay pinned beneath his revolver. He touched it once, then withdrew his hand. He thought of Dry Creek, of the men laughing on the saloon porch. Maybe they know something I don't. Maybe the Shaws played me. The thought turned his stomach. Yet beneath the doubt lived a memory Peterson's post, 3 years back. A young woman crouched over a wounded dog, her sisters sneering while she tore cloth from her dress. Dirt on her face, sorrow in her eyes. Boone had not forgotten. That evening he walked the yard again, broom in hand. The act calmed him. Sweeping was no man's labor of pride, but it steadied the nerves. His neighbors called him a giant, a brute fit for branding irons and gun smoke. None would picture him clearing dust from porch boards. Yet he did, because order in small things was a shield against chaos in larger ones. He paused, leaning on the broom, staring west where the trail cut through low hills. In 2 days, a wagon would crest that rise. It would carry his answer, whether he'd been fooled or whether the memory of that girl had not betrayed him. He felt his heart thump, heavy as hooves. He was not afraid of rifles, nor storms, nor wolves. But the unknown pressed hardest of all. Night settled with coyotes calling from the ridge. Boone stoked a fire in the hearth, sat long with coffee cooling in his cup. He listened to the wind move through chinks in the walls, sounding almost like voices. He thought of his mother's scarf, of his father's table, of all the pieces left behind. He wondered if a stranger's step on his porch could fill the hollow. Before bed, he swept once more, porch boards clean under starlight. Then he leaned the broom against the wall and looked out at the trail. Empty still, but not for long. In Ash Hollow, Cora lay awake the same night. Her trunk shut tight, her sister's laughter muffled through the floorboards. She pressed the silver pin to her chest and thought of Boone. She wondered if he remembered her face, if he had seen her shame that day at the post, if he could see beyond it now. She whispered again into darkness, "Not broken." Not yet, and far across the prairie, Hank Boone stood in his doorway, the broom at rest, the scarf stirring above his hearth. He whispered too, though no one heard, "Not fooled." Not yet. The distance between them lay wide, filled with dust, laughter, and secrets. But the trail was drawing shorter with each hour. And as Boone set the broom aside, staring at the horizon, he felt the weight of something unseen riding toward him, a truth wrapped in silence, and a storm yet to break. At dawn, the wagon rattled out of Ash Hollow, wheels groaning against ruts carved deep by years of freight. Dust billowed high, hanging in morning light like smoke from a campfire. Cora Shaw sat stiff on the bench beside the hired driver, her trunk lashed behind with rope. She clutched her shawl tighter, the silver pin hidden inside folds of cloth. The driver, a man named Garrison Pike, smelled of leather and stale beer. His hands were scarred, his eyes restless under the brim of his hat. He cracked the reins, muttering to his team, "Long road west. Dusty Ridge's a hard ride." Cora nodded, though her throat felt tight. Behind her, Ash Hollow shrank into distance. The roof of the house sagged into the hills, her sister's laughter faint as echoes. She did not turn back. The road stretched endless, pale under the sun. Sage brushed the wheels and grasshoppers sprang in clouds. Cora's dress clung heavy in the heat. Sweat gathered under her bonnet. Each jolt of the wagon rattled her bones, yet she sat upright, refusing to sag. Hours passed. At noon they stopped at a dry creek bed. Garrison watered the horses with a bucket, poured himself a flask, and leaned against the wheel. "Boone's a big man," he said, words slow. "Folk call him the giant of Dusty Ridge. Some laugh, some keep quiet. You best be mild, miss. Giants break easy if you cross 'em." Cora's lips parted, but no words came. She thought of the letter, practical, mild, suitable, the same word on a stranger's tongue. She lowered her gaze, hiding the flare in her eyes. They rolled on. By late afternoon, wind picked up, carrying grit sharp as glass. Dust swirled in whirlwinds across the flats. Garrison spat into the road. "Storm brewin'. Hope your Boone keeps a roof tight." He yanked his hat lower and snapped the reins. The horses labored, heads down. Cora pulled her shawl over her mouth, eyes stinging. The pin pressed against her palm, metal cold. She whispered beneath the cloth, "Not broken." By evening the land shifted. Mesas rose, their sides painted red and gold in sinking sun. Shadows cut long across the trail. Coyotes yipped on distant ridges. The wagon creaked, axle complaining at each rut. Garrison cursed, climbed down, kicked a wheel, then climbed back up. "Funny thing," he said, voice casual. "Your folks laughed when they paid me. Said Boone don't know what's comin'. Said he asked for a bride. They'd send him a riddle instead." Cora's chest tightened. She stared straight ahead, knuckles white on her shawl. A riddle, that was what they called her. She bit the inside of her cheek until blood came copper on her tongue. Still, she did not answer. The road climbed toward higher ground. Dust coated everything: bonnet, dress, even her lashes. Stars pricked the sky one by one. At last, Garrison pulled the team to a halt near a way station. A low shack of timber, a trough out front, a lantern swinging in the wind. They watered the horses, stretched weary legs. Inside the shack, travelers drank weak coffee for 10 cents a cup. Miners argued over claims, their voices hoarse. A woman with a baby wrapped in calico begged for bread. Cora slipped her last copper into the woman's hand, ignoring Garrison's scowl. The woman whispered thanks, eyes wet. Back on the wagon bench, Garrison shook his head. "You give too much." "World don't pay it back," Cora only whispered. "Then the world is wrong." The trail pressed on through darkness. Owls called. Once wolves howled close and the horses shied. Garrison laid a hand near his rifle, muttering curses. Cora sat still, fear a knot under her ribs, but she did not tremble. She thought of Boone again, the way he had looked years ago, not with scorn, but as if he saw something others missed. She held that memory like fire against the night. Toward dawn they crested a ridge. Below lay the flats leading into Dusty Ridge country. Smoke rose faint from some distant chimney. The land smelled of sage and wet stone. Cora's eyes burned from lack of sleep, yet she leaned forward, searching the horizon. Behind her, the sun broke, staining sky with crimson. The wagon rolled down the slope, wheels screaming. Each turn carried her further from Ash Hollow, closer to a fate she could not name. She did not know if Boone was kind or cruel, fool or savior. She only knew the laughter she left behind. Each jolt of the wheels was another mile between her and their scorn. At mid-morning they paused near a stream. Garrison filled canteens, muttering about lost time. Cora knelt at the bank, splashed her face, let cold water sting her eyes. She studied her reflection, a pale face framed by dust, lips cracked, eyes dark but steady. She hardly looked the meek girl they imagined. Rising, she brushed dirt from her dress, squared shoulders. Tomorrow she would stand before Boone. She whispered again, steady, like a vow, not broken. The horses pulled west, their hooves drumming the road. The wagon rattled toward a horizon dark with promise. And as the sun burned higher, the road carried her closer to Dusty Ridge, closer to the man whose silence had remembered her longer than she could ever guess. On that same morning, Hank Boone strode through his barn, boots stirring straw. The air smelled of leather and horses, sweet and sharp. He checked harnesses, tightened straps, rubbed a gelding's flank with calloused hands. Yet even in work, his thoughts strayed. They returned, as they often did, to a day 3 years gone at Peterson's trading post. He had been younger then, though still a giant among men. He remembered the heat, the sting of sun on the back of his neck, the sound of wagons groaning under loads of flour and sugar. He had gone to buy nails, salt, and a new bridle. His pockets were heavy with coin from cattle sales. The post bustled miners arguing, women bargaining, children darting between horses. That was when the laughter came. Sharp, dismissive. He turned his head and saw them. 3 sisters, daughters of Charles Shaw. Victoria held fabric against her skin, bargaining with the merchant in a voice sweet as honey gone sour. Isabel twirled a ribbon, laughing too loud. Both had their mother's polished smile, but it was the youngest who caught him. She was crouched beside a stray dog, its paw bleeding, ribs jutting. Her dress dragged in mud, her hair hung loose. She ignored her sister's scorn, tore strips from her petticoat, and bound the wound with hands gentle but sure. The dog licked her fingers, eyes trusting. Boone had stood rooted, nails forgotten. He remembered her face streaked with dirt, lips pressed tight in concentration, eyes full of warmth. He had known then she was different, though he hadn't known her name until later. Cora Shaw. Her father had waved her off with careless words, the youngest, not worth much, while hurrying his prettier daughters forward. Boone's jaw had clenched, but he said nothing. He watched as they pulled her away, scolding for soiling her dress. Yet he carried the image home, tucked it away like a secret. Now, sweeping hay, Boone felt the memory burn fresh. He told himself it was foolish, holding on to a moment so brief. But it was not beauty, he recalled. It was kindness. And kindness, he had learned, was rarer than silver. He left the barn, walked toward the ridge. Wind lifted dust, carrying scents of sage and rain. From this high ground, he could see the trail twisting east. Nothing moved there yet, only shimmer of heat. Still, his chest tightened as though he could sense wheels grinding closer. Back inside the cabin, he poured coffee, black and strong. He sat at his father's table, stared at the letter pinned under his revolver. Practical, mild, suitable, words chosen to bury truth. His gut told him the Shaws hid something, but the memory of that girl kneeling in mud pushed against doubt. She had not looked mild. She had looked fierce in gentleness. Afternoon settled heavy. Boone rode Flint along the creek, rifle slung. He shot 2 rattlers coiled in grass, their bodies left for hawks. He checked water levels, cut a branch fallen across the ditch. Every task hummed under the same thought. She was coming. And she might be the same girl who once knelt by a stray, or she might not. Far on the trail, the wagon lurched over rocks. Cora held her shawl tight, dust caking her lips. Garrison Pike grumbled, swore at the horses, spat into wind. Hours dragged. Cora's body ached, but her mind burned clear. She thought of Boone had he truly remembered her, or was he like her family, blind to anything but shame? She could not know. She closed her eyes, recalling that dog. She remembered its trembling body against her skirts, the hot breath as it licked her hand. She remembered the man standing by the supply crates, tall as a tree, watching without scorn. His eyes had met hers for one heartbeat. She carried that look like hidden fire. The wagon rattled onward, each mile tightening the thread between past and present. By dusk, Boone sat on his porch, broom beside him, rifle across his knees. Coyotes yipped in distance. He stared at the horizon, where red bled into purple. His memory of Cora did not fade with night. Instead, it sharpened as though carved into the dark. He whispered into emptiness, "If you're the same girl, then maybe this road ain't a joke." Maybe it's what was meant. The wind carried his words away, leaving only silence. And as stars pricked open across the sky, Boone knew the memory of a stray dog bound him to a truth yet unspoken one that would meet him at his gate within days. The same stars wheeled over the wagon grinding west. The road stretched pale in moonlight, ruts hard as bone. Garrison Pike hunched on the bench, reins loose in scarred hands, hat pulled low. His jaw worked on a sliver of tobacco. Beside him, Cora Shaw sat straight despite the ache in her back. Dust powdered her dress, her shawl drawn close. The silver pin pressed against her palm, hidden but fierce. Night was cruel on the flats. Wolves howled in chorus, their cries long and mournful. Horses shied, ears twitching. Garrison cursed and slapped reins. "Damn beasts smell fear." "Best not tremble." Miss Cora kept still. Her heart hammered, but her hands did not shake. She whispered into the shawl, "Not broken." They drove on until lantern light showed a way station. Timber shack, hitching post, trough glinting faint. A tired keeper took 2 bits for lodging, offered stale bread for free. Garrison slept on a cot inside. Cora remained outside on the bench, eyes tracing constellations. She thought of Boone, though she had never spoken his name aloud. Was he awake under the same stars? Did he remember her? The memory of that trading post lived bright in her chest. She clung to it. At dawn they rolled again. Sun rose merciless, burning shadows short. The wagon wheels screamed at ruts. Dust hung heavy, coating lips and lashes. Garrison spat grit. "Boone don't know what he's gettin'." "Your folks laughed," said he'd find surprise. Cora's stomach knotted. She bit her tongue until copper filled her mouth. She would not give him the satisfaction of answer. By midday, heat shimmered. They stopped at a shallow stream. Garrison filled a flask, drank deep, wiped his mouth. "Best stretch your legs." Cora knelt at the bank, splashed water on her face. Reflection stared back, pale, dust-streaked, but eyes dark and steady. Not meek, not mild. She straightened, squared shoulders, returned to the wagon without a word. The road climbed into broken hills. Mesas flamed red, shadows carving canyons. Coyotes yipped, echoing sharp. A hawk circled overhead, shadow sweeping across them. Garrison eyed the sky. Storm brewing again. West wind smells of iron, sure enough. Clouds stacked black by late afternoon. Wind lashed the team, dust stinging like glass. The wagon lurched, canvas snapping. Garrison fought the reins. "Hold tight, miss." Cora clung to the seat, teeth gritted. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling after. Rain spat, then poured, turning dust to slick clay. Wheels sank, horses strained. Garrison whipped them on. The wagon swayed, nearly tipped. Cora's nails dug into wood. She thought of her family's laughter, thought of Boone's eyes at the post, thought of her vow. Not broken. Hours later, storm passed, leaving air cool and sharp. The wagon crawled on through mud. Garrison muttered curses, shoulders hunched. Cora breathed steady, though her arms ached from holding tight. She had not screamed, not once. By nightfall, they reached another way station, little more than a stable and lean-to. Fire burned low in a pit. Travelers huddled close freighters. A drifter with one arm, a mother nursing a child. Coffee cost 10 cents, stew 20. Cora traded her last coin for a bowl, though Garrison scowled. She ate slow, each bite heavy but needed. A child across the fire stared, thin cheeks hollow. She pushed half her portion toward him. His mother mouthed thanks. Garrison muttered again, "Fool girl." Cora met his eyes. Better fool than cruel. He snorted, turned away. Yet a silence hung after, heavier than words. When dawn broke, the wagon rolled west again. Land shifted flats, opening to wide pasture, grass bending in waves. The air smelled of sage and rain. Cora's chest lifted, as if breath came easier. Yet with each mile her heart pounded harder. Tomorrow they would reach Dusty Ridge. Tomorrow she would stand before Boone. She touched the pin beneath her shawl, whispering the vow once more. Not broken. At Dusty Ridge, Boone rose early, axe in hand. He split logs in steady rhythm, each strike echoing. Sweat slicked his back, though morning air was cool. He stacked wood neat by the door, then paused, staring east. No wagon yet, only haze of distance. Still, his chest tightened, as though he felt it rolling closer. He returned inside, brewed coffee strong, ate bread hard as stone. The scarf above the hearth stirred in draft. He glanced at it, jaw tight. He remembered again the dog at Peterson's post. Remembered the girl's hands stained with dirt. He told himself if she was that girl, then maybe fate had not played him false. If not, then he would face it like any storm. That evening he walked the yard, broom in hand, sweeping boards clean though no one would see. Order mattered. Dust rose, drifted into twilight. He leaned the broom against the wall, eyes fixed on the horizon. The road stretched there, winding between hills, empty still, but not for long. And as the night settled, Boone felt the trail itself breathing, each mile carrying her nearer, each turn bringing the cruel jest closer to his gate. Morning broke clear, the sky washed pale blue, the earth damp from storm. Hank Boone strode his yard, boots thudding on packed earth. He checked the corral rails, tightened a latch, then paused at the wooden gate that fronted the trail. Rough-hewn, sun-bleached, it stood between him and whatever the Shaws had sent. He rested a hand on the top bar, broad fingers curling over weathered grain. The wood was scarred from years of storms, yet it held. Boone wondered if he would. He spent the day in restless labor. At the barn he mended a harness, oiling cracked leather. In the kitchen he scrubbed the table again, as if polish could steady nerves. By noon he found himself sweeping dust from the porch, though it was already clean. Each task repeated, each motion circling back to waiting. The scarf above the hearth fluttered faint in draft. Boone glanced at it, jaw tightening. His mother had believed a house needed warmth more than walls. He had built walls. Warmth was what he waited on now. Yet doubt gnawed. Practical, mild, suitable. He muttered the words like curses, swinging the broom harder until dust rose thick. By mid-afternoon he saddled Flint, rode the ridge, scanned the horizon. The trail shimmered in heat, empty still. He rode back slow, unease heavy. At the gate he dismounted, ran a hand along the bar again. Soon, he could feel it in his bones. Miles east, the wagon creaked toward Dusty Ridge. Cora sat stiff, shawl clutched, bonnet streaked with dust. Garrison Pike spat over the wheel, reins slack in his hands. "Near there now," he muttered. "By sundown you'll see Boone's place." Cora's stomach knotted. Her family's laughter still rang in memory, yet her grip on the silver pin steadied. She whispered low, "Not broken." The road narrowed between low hills. Grass bent in waves, a hawk wheeled overhead. The horse's hooves drummed steady, the sound like a heartbeat against silence. Cora watched horizon darken, each mile pulling her closer. At a shallow ford they stopped. Garrison watered the team, cursed the mud. "Hope Boone's worth the ride," he said, tone mocking. Cora looked past him, eyes on the west. She did not answer. At Dusty Ridge, Boone chopped wood, each strike ringing. Sweat slicked his brow, muscles straining. He stacked the logs neat, then wiped his axe, carried it to the shed. Yet his eyes strayed always to the gate. He could not escape it. The gate was a promise, or a warning. Evening drew near. The sky turned copper, shadows stretching. Boone stood at the gate, leaning heavy on the top bar. He heard only wind in the grass, cattle lowing soft. But under it, deeper, came another sound, faint rattle of wheels. His chest tightened. He lifted his head. Dust rose on the trail, faint but sure. The wagon was coming. He unlatched the gate, swung it wide, then stepped back, hands curling into fists. The horses appeared first, manes lathered. Then the wagon, canvas streaked, wheels squealing. On the bench sat Garrison Pike, reins loose, and beside him a woman wrapped in brown shawl, bonnet low. Boone's heart hammered. She was not the shining sister he half expected. She was heavier, her figure broad, her clothes plain. Dust streaked her face. Yet as the wagon drew close, she lifted her eyes. And he knew them. Dark, steady, the same eyes that once bent over a stray dog in the mud. The wagon halted. Garrison spat, swung down, muttered something about long miles. Boone hardly heard. He stepped forward, towering, shadow falling across the yard. His hand rose, palm open. The woman Cora hesitated, then placed her hand in his. Warm, roughened by rope and needle, trembling faint. Boone closed his fingers, steady but gentle. For a breath the world narrowed to touch alone. "Miss Shaw," Boone said, voice low, careful. "Mr. Boone," she answered, meeting his gaze. Something passed between them, recognition, fragile but real. Boone's chest eased, the letter's curse blunted by memory's truth. Garrison hauled the trunk down, dropped it with a grunt. "She's yours," he muttered, climbing back to the bench. He snapped reins, the wagon rattled away, leaving dust hanging. Silence fell. Only the creak of leather, the distant low of cattle. Boone still held Cora's hand. She did not pull away. "Welcome," he said finally, voice rough. "This is Dusty Ridge." Her eyes flicked to the house, the barn, the wide sky. Then back to him. "It's large," she said quietly, "and lonely." Boone's jaw tightened. It was. He released her hand, lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing, carried it toward the porch, set it by the door. He turned, waiting. Cora stepped slow, her shawl brushing dust. She climbed the steps, paused at the threshold. Behind her lay laughter sharp as knives, a house that never wanted her. Before her stood silence, vast but waiting. She drew breath, crossed inside. Boone followed, shutting the door behind. The scarf stirred above the hearth, catching lamplight. The house seemed to breathe for the first time in years. Yet even as the door closed, both knew the cruel jest was not finished, for shadows of the Shaws still clung to her steps, and Boone's silence held questions unasked. The cabin's air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. A kettle hissed on the stove, steam rising soft. Boone crossed the room, broad shoulders filling the space, and ladled stew into 2 tin bowls. The gesture was simple, practiced, yet heavy with meaning. He set one bowl before her on the oak table, scarred by years of use. Cora stood a moment at the threshold, shawl clutched tight. The scarf above the hearth fluttered faint, as though stirred by breath long gone. She inhaled the scent of onions, beef, and fresh bread scents she had not known in her father's house, where meals were lean, laughter sharp. Her hands trembled as she untied her bonnet. Dust fell in a soft cloud. She sat, awkward, bonnet beside her, fingers pressed against her lap. Boone took his place across, spoon in hand. He ate first, slow, measured. Cora lifted her spoon, tasted. Warmth spread down her throat, heavy but comforting. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crack of firewood, the faint clink of spoons against tin. Boone studied her over the rim of his bowl, not in the appraising way men weighed women for worth, but with the quiet curiosity of one measuring truth against memory. He saw the same eyes he had glimpsed at Peterson's post, dark, steady, holding more sorrow than youth should bear. At last he spoke, voice low. "Your family said little." Cora's spoon paused. She lifted her gaze. "Did they?" He set the spoon down, leaned back. "Your father's words were careful, too careful. He wrote of practical matters, not of you." Heat flushed her cheeks. She forced a faint smile, bitter as ash. "Then he spoke true." Boone's brow furrowed. "I don't believe that." She looked away, to the scarf above the hearth. Her voice thinned. They never believed otherwise. Silence pressed again, thicker this time. Boone reached for bread, broke it with his hands, set a piece before her. She accepted, fingers brushing rough crust. For a moment their hands nearly touched. Her heart jolted. She hid it by tearing bread into small pieces. The fire cracked, shadows shifting along the walls. Boone's voice returned, softer. I remember you. 3 years ago, at Peterson's post. You tore cloth from your dress for a wounded dog. Her head snapped up. Breath caught in her throat. You remember that? I remember thinking, Boone said, that anyone who'd soil her dress for a stray was worth knowing. Her eyes burned. For years, that day had been another shame, another scolding, another laugh from her sisters. Yet here it was remembered as something else. She pressed a hand against her shawl, against the pin hidden inside. I thought no one saw, she whispered. I saw, Boone answered simply. They ate in silence again, but the air had shifted. Not heavy, not empty, but tentative, like ground soft after rain. When bowls were empty, Boone rose, cleared the table, washed tin in a basin. Cora moved to help, but he lifted a hand. You're tired. Long road. Rest. She hesitated, then nodded. Her body ached, but her mind churned. The cabin felt strange, yet not hostile. She glanced around. Shelves lined with books worn from reading. Tools hung neat. The scarf above the hearth. Everything spoke of order, of hands that cared though they were rough. Boone returned, drying his hands. He stood by the fire, gaze fixed on flames. I didn't ask for beauty, he said, voice low. I asked for truth. Cora swallowed hard. She rose, fingers tight on her shawl. Her voice trembled. Truth is, I was sent as a burden. A jest at your expense, Boone turned. His eyes caught hers, steady, unflinching. Then the jest is theirs, not mine. She drew breath, chest tight. In his gaze she saw no mockery, no laughter. Only recognition. It unnerved her, yet steadied her too. The night deepened. Outside, coyotes cried. The wind rattled shutters. Boone fetched a lantern, lit the back hall. There's a room. Small, but yours. She followed, trunk heavy in her arms until he took it easily, carried it down the hall. He set it by the door, opened the room. A narrow bed, clean linens, a vase waiting for flowers not yet cut. Cora stepped inside, throat thick. Thank you, she whispered. Boone nodded once, turned away, lantern casting his shadow long. She closed the door, leaned against it, shawl pressed to her chest. She whispered to the pin, to herself, not broken. Not yet. In the main room, Boone stood by the fire, broom propped nearby. The scarf above the hearth stirred again. He looked at it, then at the closed door down the hall. His jaw eased. Perhaps silence could be shared, and in sharing, broken. But neither knew that supper's fragile peace was only the first test. Shadows of laughter still trailed her, and Boone's memory would soon demand more than words. Morning came pale and sharp. Smoke drifted from the chimney, the scent of pine wood curling into air washed clean by night rain. Inside, the cabin was hushed but alive. Boone stood at the stove, hair still damp from a bucket wash, shirt sleeves rolled. He cracked eggs into a black pan, their hiss the only sound. Coffee bubbled thick, filling the room with its bitter perfume. Cora stirred in the back room. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, hands folded in her lap. The linen smelled of sun, of soap, not of home but of care. Her shawl lay draped across a chair. The silver pin glinted faint in dawn light. She touched it once, then rose. Her body still stiff from travel, but her step carried something new. Steadiness. When she entered the kitchen, Boone glanced up. His eyes softened, just a flicker, then returned to the pan. Coffee? He asked. Yes, she said, voice hushed but firm. He poured into a tin cup, slid it across the table. She wrapped her fingers around the warmth, lifted it slow. The steam rose. carrying with it the strange calm of this place. Boone set eggs onto plates, laid bread beside. They ate in silence at first. The crackle of fire filled the gaps. Outside, a rooster crowed late, as if uncertain. At last Boone spoke, voice low but clear. "Yesterday, when I helped you down, you looked at me different. Not as stranger, not as kin. More like measuring. Like you were weighing if I could be trusted." Cora's spoon halted. Her chest tightened. She set it down carefully, eyes meeting his. "I was. Was I right?" His gaze held steady, not pressing but not yielding either. She drew a slow breath. "I've found trust is not given. It's tested. And too often, it fails." Boone leaned back, arms crossing. "What do you think I want from you?" Her lips parted, closed again. The question rang heavy. Her family's words echoed, burden, shame, problem. She steadied herself. "Not what they said I could give." For a long moment, Boone said nothing. Fire popped. Coffee steamed. Then his hand reached across, large and rough, settling over hers. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "What I want," he said, voice low as the hum of earth, "is truth. Even if it stings, even if it cuts me open, I've had enough lies to last a lifetime." Her throat ached. Tears burned but did not fall. "Then you may have chosen poorly. Truth makes enemies faster than friends." Boone's brow furrowed. "Then let me be the fool who welcomes it." Silence swelled, but it was not empty. It was the silence of groundbreaking before seed. Cora's fingers tightened slightly under his. She whispered, "Not broken." "Not yet." Boone tilted his head, puzzled, but he did not press. He withdrew his hand, returned to his plate. "Eat," he said simply. They finished in quiet, but the weight of the question lingered, like smoke that would not clear. After breakfast, Boone showed her the ranch. The morning air was crisp, smelling of wet sage. He walked steady, his shadow long across the yard. Cora followed, her shawl drawn close, eyes scanning everything. He pointed to the barn. "Built it myself. Roof leaks in storm, but it holds." They passed the chicken coop, hens clucking as if to gossip. Cora smiled faint, the first since arrival. Boone saw it, though he said nothing. They reached the pasture fence. Beyond, cattle grazed, tails swishing. Boone leaned on the rail, arms resting heavy. "Started with nothing but this land. Stubborn hands built the rest." Still building, Cora placed her hands on the rail too. The wood felt solid, rough against her skin. She looked across the wide space, the cattle, the grass rolling into distance. Her chest eased just a little. Boone turned, studying her. His voice dropped. "I didn't choose your family at random. After Peterson's post, I asked questions. Learned your father's dealings were crooked. Learned someone in that house kept tearing the veil off his trades." Cora's breath caught. Her stomach clenched. Boone's gaze sharpened. "It was you, wasn't it?" Her lips parted. She could lie. She could keep silence. But his eyes held steady, waiting. She swallowed. "Yes, I couldn't look away. I spoke when I should have been silent." Boone nodded once, slow. "That's why they sent you." Her shoulders sagged. "As punishment." As jest, his voice grew rough, but not with anger. "Then their jest is my fortune." Her eyes widened. Words tangled in her throat. Boone turned back to the pasture, jaw set. "I thought I wanted information, but I was wrong. What I wanted was the woman who carried it." Even when it cost her, Cora pressed the pin beneath her shawl. The metal burned against her skin, not cold now, but hot, like ember. The wind shifted, carrying scents of grass and horses. Boone's voice lowered. "So tell me, Cora Shaw, do you trust me yet?" Her lips trembled. "Not yet." His eyes met hers again. "Then I'll wait." They walked back slow. The cabin loomed, plain but solid. Boone's boots thudded heavy on the porch. He paused, turning once more. "You'll find I'm not much for pretty words," he said. "But I'll speak plain. You're no burden here. Not to me, her chest tightened. For the first time, she believed it might be true. Inside, the scarf above the hearth stirred as if nodding. Shadows shifted on the walls. Silence held, but it was not empty now. It was waiting, full of questions, promises, storms yet to come. And as Cora laid her shawl on the chair, Boone knew the next answer would matter more than all, when shadows of past rose to test the fragile trust they had begun to build. The next morning broke silver and cold. Mist clung low over the pasture, dew shining on grass like shards of glass. Boone saddled Flint at first light, the gelding's breath fogging in air sharp enough to sting lungs. He beckoned toward the yard. Come, I want to show you something. Cora hesitated at the doorway, shawl wrapped close. Her bonnet hung unused. The air dampened her hair, curling loose strands against her cheek. She stepped down, skirts brushing wet earth. Boone waited, steady, reins in one hand. They walked past the barn, beyond the corrals. Chickens scratched at mud, cattle lowed soft. The world smelled of hay, damp soil, and the faint musk of horses. They reached the pasture fence. Boone opened the gate, held it wide. She stepped through, shoes sinking in soft ground. The field spread endless. Grass rippled like a green sea, dotted with black cattle. Beyond rose red bluffs, the horizon vast. Cora stopped, breath caught. She had never seen so much space untamed. Boone stood beside her, arms folded across chest. His shadow loomed long. 5 years, he said. Started with bare land. No house, no stock. Just me and 2 hands. I built this with stubborn back and little sleep. Cora turned, studied his profile. The lines carved by sun and labor, the eyes not weary but proud. Why? She asked softly. His jaw tightened. Because a man needs land under his boots. Something no one can take. She looked across the field again. Cattle moved slow, tails flicking. Birds lifted from sage, wings flashing silver. It's beautiful, she whispered. Boone's gaze shifted to her. It's lonely, he said. The word struck deep. She knew loneliness. Its weight, its silence. For a moment, their eyes held, both recognizing the echo in the other. They walked farther, grass whispering around them. Boone showed her the stream, swollen from storm. He spoke of plans, another barn, a line of apple trees, a well deeper than the old one. His words were plain, but beneath them beat a rhythm. This was not just land, it was legacy. Cora listened, silent, yet each detail pressed warmth into her chest. Here was a man who built not for show, but for keeping. Different from her father's schemes, her mother's sharp bargains. This was honesty carved into earth. At the pasture's edge, Boone stopped, leaning on the fence rail. The wind tugged at his shirt, carried the scent of sage and rain. His voice dropped. I didn't tell you all. When I asked your father, I thought I wanted more than a wife. I thought I wanted truth about his trades. I'd heard whispers. Deals gone sour. Families losing land. Cora stiffened. The air between them thickened. Boone's eyes met hers. I know now it wasn't information I sought. It was you, but I need to hear it plain. Did you expose him? Her lips parted. She looked away, across the field, heart pounding. Memories crowded contracts she had questioned, bruises she had seen, lies she had spoken against. Slowly she nodded. Yes, it was me. Every time Boone's jaw worked, then eased. Then I was right. Her breath caught. And now? Do you think me foolish? A trouble to your name? He shook his head. I think you brave. Braver than any man who hides behind a ledger. Her throat tightened. No one had ever called her that. Silence stretched, but it was not empty. The wind moved through grass, a steady whisper. Boone turned back to the pasture. His voice softened. I wanted someone who sees what's real. Even if it hurts, even if it shames me. Cora's hand went to her shawl, pressing the hidden pin. Her eyes burned. Then you may regret it. Truth has teeth. Boone's gaze returned, steady as stone. Let it bite. Better than living blind, the words lodged deep, fierce as any vow. They walked back slow, the sun climbing higher, mist burning away. The ranch spread wide before them, no longer empty but edged with promise. At the porch, Boone paused, turning. Cora Shaw, this land is mine by sweat and deed. But if you choose, it can be yours too. Not by contract, not by bargain. By choice, her chest trembled. She drew breath, met his eyes. Then let me choose in my time. He nodded, jaw easing. So be it. She stepped inside first. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and bread. She laid her shawl across the chair again, fingers brushing fabric slow, almost tender. The silver pin pressed against her palm, warm now, as if carrying fire. Boone lingered at the doorway, broom in hand, eyes on her. Something in him eased. The laughter of the Shaws had no place here. The open field had spoken louder. Yet even as the pasture's vastness offered hope, both knew trials still waited. Truth once spoken would invite storms neither could yet see. The storm arrived not in thunder, but in silence. Days passed, each carrying weight. Cora rose early, tended small tasks, sweeping, chopping vegetables, fetching water from the well. Boone worked fields, mended rails, drove cattle from one pasture to another. They spoke little, yet silence shifted. No longer empty, but waiting. One evening, sun bleeding red across the bluffs, Boone called from the yard. Come. His voice was steady, but something beneath carried edge. Cora followed. The air smelled of sage and smoke, the ground warm from day's heat. He led her toward the far fence line, where rails leaned from years of weather. They stopped at the edge of wide pasture, grass swaying gold in fading light. Boone leaned on the rail, arms heavy, his gaze fixed far, as if searching beyond horizon. I've lived with silence too long, he said. Now I need words. Honest ones. Cora's hands tightened on her shawl. Ask. His jaw worked. When I sent for a wife, your father answered quick. Too quick. Tell me true, why did they send you? Her chest tightened. She thought of laughter spilling across the Shaw kitchen, of words like stones, burden, shame, problem. She drew breath. Because I speak what they would hide, because I see what they would bury. I was their jest, their punishment, their shame. Boone turned, eyes steady. And do you see me the same? She met his gaze. Shadows crossed his face, but his eyes held warmth, steady as earth. No. I see a man who remembers what others forget, who builds with hands instead of schemes. The fence groaned under wind. Birds scattered from sage. Boone's hand lifted, tentative. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, fingers rough yet gentle. Your family's laughter don't echo here, not unless you carry it. Her breath caught. It echoes still. Then let me drown it, Boone whispered. The air thickened, charged. He leaned closer, slow, giving space to flee. She did not. Instead, she rose on toes, closing the distance. Their lips met soft at first, testing, then deeper, steady, like two wanderers finding home after miles of dust. Her shawl slipped, falling against rails. Boone's arms encircled her, not crushing but sheltering. She pressed close, heart hammering, yet unafraid. For the first time, she felt weight lift, the scorn of sisters, the sneers of parents, all fading against the warmth of this moment. When they broke apart, breathless, Boone rested his forehead against hers. His voice was rough, but soft. Beautiful. Her eyes widened. No one had ever spoken the word to her without mockery. It lodged deep, sharp, and tender. She closed her eyes, tears burning. Say it again. He did. The sky deepened purple. Stars pricked open. Coyotes yipped far across ridge. They stood by the fence, shadows tangled. Boone's thumb traced her cheek, then her lip, gentle as a vow. Cora whispered, voice shaking. They sent me to break me, to laugh at you, to rid themselves of me. But here, her breath faltered. Here I feel seen. Boone's grip tightened, steady. Their loss. My gain, silence stretched, filled with crickets, wind, heartbeats. She laid her head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum. For once, silence was no burden. It was shelter. The moment lingered, fragile yet fierce. But Boone's eyes lifted to horizon. He knew storms came after calm. Shadows still waited, secrets, family, doubt. Yet with her in his arms, he felt ready. And as night spread across Dusty Ridge, their kiss bound them in defiance of laughter past. But storms of tomorrow already gathered beyond the hills. The storm came not with thunder, but with silence from Ash Hollow. No letter of blessing, no word of kin, only emptiness, sharp as a blade. Yet at Dusty Ridge, the days pressed forward. Boone rose early, split logs, drove cattle, hammered nails for a new shed. Cora swept floors, cooked meals, mended shirts. Work stitched them together, each task quiet but certain. Still, shadows lingered. Cora felt them when she lit the lantern, when she folded linens. Her sister's laughter clung to her memory, sharp as burrs. At night, she whispered to the silver pin, "Not broken." Boone heard sometimes, but he did not question. He knew storms best by the sound of wind before it rose. Weeks passed. Word spread in Dry Creek. Boone took the fat Shaw girl. Men muttered over whiskey. Some laughed. Others shrugged. Boone ignored them, shoulders broad enough to carry silence. Yet inside, anger coiled. He wanted to ride east, slam fists against the Shaw table. But when he looked at Cora, bent over bread, or standing with shawl flaring in wind, he knew her strength lay in staying. So he stayed too. 3 weeks after her arrival, Boone led Cora to the ridge at sundown. The sky blazed gold, clouds rimmed with fire. He stopped at a spot marked by stones. "Here," he said. She frowned. "What is it?" He kicked dust, eyes steady. "Where I'll build. Not just barns. A house. Bigger. Warmer. For us." Her breath caught. She looked at him, then the horizon. The field stretched endless, cattle moving slow, the land wide as a promise. She pressed the pin in her shawl, voice low. "They thought they cast me off, but they gave me this." Boone's gaze softened. "Their loss," he said again. The wind carried sage and smoke. He stepped closer, his hand closing around hers. "Cora Shaw, will you bind your days with mine? Not because they forced it, because you choose." Her throat tightened. She remembered the kitchen laughter, her father's cold eyes, her mother's smirk. She remembered Boone's silence at the trading post, his broom against dust, his steady hand. Tears burned, but they were bright. "I choose." The next day, they wed. No finery, no kin. A traveling preacher stopped at the ranch, his mule tied outside. 2 ranch hands stood witness. Cora wore her best dress, patched but clean. Boone wore his Sunday shirt, boots polished though cracked. The vows were spoken plain, words carried not by choir, but by wind over grass. The preacher prayed brief, took his coin, rode on. The ranch hands tipped hats, grinning shy, then returned to chores. Boone and Cora stood alone before the cabin, husband and wife. No bells, no gifts, no blessings. Yet when Boone bent to kiss her, the world seemed enough. That night they sat on the porch, stars scattering across black sky. Coyotes sang, cattle lowed, wind moved through sage. Boone's arm wrapped around her, steady, sure. "Any regrets?" he asked. Cora leaned against his chest, listening to the thrum of his heart. "Only that it took 3 years for us to speak true." He chuckled, low, rare. "We've the rest of our lives to make up for it." The scarf above the hearth stirred in draft when they entered. The cabin breathed fuller, no longer a house of silence but of shared breath. Shadows of laughter still haunted, but weaker now, fading with each fire lit, each loaf baked, each board swept clean. In time, Boone raised new walls on the ridge, timbers hauled, nails driven, sweat poured. Cora carried water, stacked stones, planted seeds near the door. The new house rose plain but strong, a promise against storms. Dry Creek whispered still, some with scorn, some with envy. But Boone did not answer. He had his answer already in the woman who stood beside him, shawl lifting in wind, eyes dark but shining. Together they turned jest into legacy. Together they built not just walls but life. And beneath stars over dusty ridge, Cora knew the cruel joke had failed for in choosing truth and kindness. They had built a new house stronger than scorn, steadier than laughter, and theirs alone. The story of Hank Boone and Cora Shaw carried 4 truths. First, that silence can wound as deeply as words. Yet it can also shelter 2 souls when shared with honesty. Second, that what the world mocks as weakness may become the very strength another has been seeking. Third, that labor and care, from sweeping porches to planting seeds, can weave a life more enduring than gold. And finally, that exile meant as punishment can become the doorway to belonging. Once, when a neighbor's calf broke through the fence during a storm, Cora ran into rain, skirts heavy with mud, and lifted the trembling animal, though her hands bled. Boone found her there, sheltering the calf under her shawl, whispering calm until the thunder passed. In that moment, he saw again the girl at the trading post, unchanged, unbroken. And he realized the jest had gifted him the only partner who would never turn away from suffering. And so the question remains for all of us. When families or crowds brand someone as burden, do we join the laughter, or do we see the hidden worth waiting to be chosen? If this story moved you, leave a comment with your thoughts, subscribe for more tales of the West, and share it so others may remember that dignity is often born from scorn.